My name is Lily Harper, and at 26, I was folding a wrinkled gray dress on the floor of my apartment, while across town, my fiancé's father, Victor Caldwell, the billionaire no one ever sees, was preparing for a gala where I'd finally meet him. But what truly cut deep wasn't the silk, the diamonds, or the unfamiliar world I was about to step into. It was the silence in my phone and the echo of Ethan's voice earlier that night. "You'll embarrass me if you show up looking like that." I stood by the window, clutching that dress like it might fall apart if I let go. But what hurt worse than his words was how easily he turned away when I didn't argue. Just closed the bedroom door like it wasn't his problem. Like I wasn't. If you've ever felt invisible at home, or if this story hits close to your heart, please tap like. It lets me know I'm not alone out here. What he didn't know was that dress, faded, thrifted, simple, held the last whisper of someone who raised me to believe that kindness was never a weakness. Not even when the world said otherwise. How did I go from being the girl who gave her coat to a freezing stranger, to the one being told her sleeves were too plain for a photograph? It started with a sharp tick of the clock. Midnight. My apartment was dark except for the soft amber glow of the stovetop light I'd forgotten to turn off. A quiet hum came from the radiator, just enough to drown out the sound of my own thoughts. I sat on the edge of my mattress, gray dress draped over my knees. One hand smoothed the fabric over and over again, a useless attempt to iron it flat with my palm. I should have been asleep hours ago, but my brain wouldn't let me rest. Above me, a faint creak. My upstairs neighbor pacing again. Below me, the smell of someone's burnt takeout drifting through the vents. I pulled my robe tighter. The dress was too thin for winter, but I didn't have another one. And besides, I wasn't going to let Victor Caldwell's money change who I was. That was the one rule I had promised myself. Still, my chest felt like it was being squeezed from the inside. My phone buzzed beside me. "Ethan, don't be late. Dad hates tardiness. No, I miss you. No, I can't wait to see you. Just that. He hadn't come home that night. Said he needed to prepare. But I knew what that meant, checking every detail twice, from his cufflinks to the list of donors. He'd been born into that world." He could glide through those rooms without a second thought. Me? I was just hoping no one would see my hands shake when I reached for a glass of champagne. I leaned over and opened the top drawer of my nightstand. Inside, tucked beneath a candle and a few stray receipts, was a photo I couldn't let go of. Mom, smiling from behind her gardening gloves, sunflowers rising tall behind her. Her flannel shirt was buttoned crooked. She never cared about perfect. I could almost hear her voice. "Be kind, even when no one's looking. Especially then." I held the photo to my chest, pressing it close like it might ground me. My fingers brushed the edge of the frame. A tight lump formed in my throat. "I don't belong there," I whispered to the quiet. "I never have." The city outside my window kept breathing. Soft tire sounds over wet pavement, someone's laugh echoing faintly from down the block. What if tomorrow ruins everything? What if I walk in that room and they all see it, that I'm not like them and never will be? I set the photo down gently, as if the wrong movement might crack it. I stood, grabbed the dress again, and held it up to my body in the mirror. The lighting was unkind, fluorescent and buzzing. My reflection looked pale, tired, not polished, not perfect. I bit the inside of my cheek. Would Ethan defend me tomorrow? Would he smile and say I looked beautiful, or would he shrink away the way he had when his father's name came up? I reached for the scarf on the coat rack, the one Ethan had insisted I wear to the gala. Cashmere, expensive, cream-colored, soft as breath. He said his father liked elegance. I wrapped it loosely around my neck and stared at myself again. Same dress, same me. Just one piece pretending to be someone else. My fingers gripped the ends of the scarf. What if I'm not what he needs me to be? The thought wrapped around me tighter than the fabric ever could. I dropped the scarf onto the chair and walked back to the bed, curling my knees up under me. I glanced at the clock again. 12:27 a.m. Sleep still wouldn't come. Somewhere in the building, someone turned on music, low jazz, barely audible like background noise from another life. I closed my eyes, and I drifted, not into dreams, but into memory. Back to the last time I stood in front of someone who thought I wasn't enough. It started with the clink of cutlery, the burnt edge of garlic bread, the cold glare of my stepmother across the table, and the plate I refused to serve. The morning sun didn't warm me, it just made the city's sharp corners more visible. I stepped out of the subway station near the venue, clutching my coat tighter around my body, the scarf wound neatly at my neck like armor. My heels clicked with too much confidence for how nervous I actually felt. Each step echoed like it might shatter the quiet I was trying to keep inside. Ethan had texted again before I left the apartment. "Remember, smile, don't say too much, and don't be late." That last part, "don't be late," was repeated 3 times in a separate message. He hadn't asked how I slept, probably because he already knew the answer. The air outside carried the tang of hot dog carts and rain-soaked concrete. Early autumn in New York. It was the kind of chill that slipped under your skin, even when the sun was out. I had 25 minutes until the Caldwell Foundation's charity gala began. 25 minutes to convince an invisible man I was worth his son's future. I cut through the park, a shortcut Ethan told me not to take. "Too unpredictable," he'd warned. "Stick to the sidewalk. Appearances matter." But I needed the quiet. Tree branches swayed overhead, casting shadows across the path. Leaves crunched underfoot, and the breeze tugged at my coat. The city felt miles away here, like I'd stumbled into a softer version of it, one that hadn't quite learned how to bite. That's when I saw him. On a weathered bench near the edge of the path, tucked under a thin blanket that barely covered his knees, sat a man who looked completely out of place in this well-kept pocket of Manhattan. His coat was worn, almost threadbare, and his shoes, if you could still call them that, had holes near the toes. His back was slightly hunched, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't even looking around. Just sitting there, shivering. My legs slowed before my brain could catch up. "You don't have time, Lily. You can't be late." But my eyes locked on his face. The lines etched into it weren't just from age. They were the kind carved by disappointment, by loneliness. His gaze hovered just above the horizon, like he wasn't looking at anything but remembering something he'd lost a long time ago. I reached into my tote and pulled out the sandwich I'd packed, turkey and cheese on wheat, the one thing I could eat without worrying about crumbs or smudging lipstick. I walked toward him. He didn't look up until I was 2 feet away. "Sir," I said softly, "are you hungry?" His eyes, blue, sharp, unexpectedly alert, met mine. "I missed the breakfast run," he said, voice rough like gravel and old smoke. "Shelter was full last night." I hesitated, then extended the sandwich. "It's not much, but it's fresh. I haven't touched it." He looked from the sandwich to my face, not judging, just seeing. "Why?" he asked. It wasn't aggressive, just curious. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe because someone once did the same for me." That part was true. Years ago, after Mom died and I hadn't eaten for 2 days, our neighbor Mrs. Green showed up with a casserole dish and a box of tissues. She didn't say much, just handed them over, like grief was a language she'd once spoken too. He took the sandwich carefully, like it might disappear if he wasn't gentle. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet. "That's kind of you." He looked down, then shivered again. The wind had picked up, sneaking past my coat and down my sleeves. Without thinking, I unwound the scarf from around my neck and draped it over his shoulders. His fingers paused over the cashmere like it was foreign to him. "It's warm," I said, already stepping back. "You need it more than I do." He didn't stop me, didn't argue, just watched me with that same calm, unreadable gaze as I turned and glanced at the time. 6:17 p.m. My heart dropped. I was late. No, no, no. I broke into a half run, my heels scraping against the concrete path. Each step felt heavier than the last. I clutched my coat, willing the wind to push me faster. I could already hear Ethan's voice in my head, sharp, disappointed, accusing. "What were you thinking? You gave away your lunch? Your scarf? You ruined everything." The sound of the city returned all at once. Cars honking, voices shouting, sirens wailing in the distance. My breath came faster, my vision narrowing to the crosswalk up ahead. A block past that stood the event hall, glowing gold from the inside out. I didn't stop, didn't think, just ran. But somewhere inside me something shifted, the kind of shift that doesn't make sense until much later, because I should have felt panic, regret. Instead, I thought of his hands, how they trembled when they touched the sandwich, how his eyes softened at the feel of that scarf, and I heard Mom's voice again, that old whisper from the back of my memory. Real worth is how you treat someone who has nothing to offer you in return. Still, I had to ask myself, did I just jeopardize my future for a man whose name I'll never know? Then came the twist I didn't see coming. As I slowed to cross the last street, I glanced back toward the park. Just instinct, maybe. One final look before I let it all go. But the bench was empty, and the scarf, my scarf, was gone with him. The gala doors loomed like the entrance to a courtroom, cold and indifferent. I reached them breathless, cheeks flushed, the burn of my rushed walk still in my legs. My heels wobbled slightly on the cobblestones as I caught my reflection in the glass, a little too windblown, scarfless, and 10 minutes too late. Inside, the air changed, cool, perfumed. The kind of artificial luxury that never let you forget you didn't belong. A doorman nodded stiffly. "Ms. Harper?" I gave the smallest nod I could manage, swallowing hard. The chandeliers above glittered like ice. Velvet drapes lined the walls, and the hum of elegant conversations buzzed beneath the soft strains of a live quartet. Everyone looked like they'd stepped off a runway. Sharp tuxedos, silk gowns, laughter that barely touched the eyes. And then I saw him, Ethan. He stood near the entrance to the main hall, shoulders squared, jaw clenched. The moment our eyes met, his expression collapsed into something I'd never seen before. Not shock, not concern, just fury. He moved toward me in swift, clipped steps. His hand shot out and wrapped around my wrist, not hard, but enough to pull me off balance and behind a decorative pillar just out of sight. "You're 17 minutes late," he hissed, his breath warm and furious against my cheek. I tried to speak, but my lips wouldn't move. 17? Lily, what the hell were you thinking? Where's the scarf? His eyes scanned me. "Where is it?" I gave it away. "To who?" His voice rose a little too loud, then dropped again. "To who, Lily?" "There was a man in the park. He was freezing. He hadn't eaten." "You gave away the scarf," he said, like each word tasted worse than the last. "The one I bought for this night. The one I told you was important." I looked at him, and something inside me went quiet. "It was just a scarf," I whispered. His eyes flared. "No, Lily, it wasn't just a scarf. It was your introduction. It was the first impression. It was the one thing that made you look like you belonged here." I took a step back, and suddenly I was 10 years old again, standing on a porch in a hand-me-down coat, while my stepmother told me I'd embarrass the family in front of the pastor. He didn't let me move far. "I told you this mattered," Ethan said. "I told you he watches everything. My father doesn't forgive sloppiness. He doesn't believe in second chances." "I helped someone," I said. "He was shaking. He hadn't eaten." "And you thought that was more important than this?" He gestured to the room behind us, to the chandeliers, the gowns, the curated smiles. "This is our future. Or it was." The air around us felt thinner. The music in the next room swelled. I looked down at his hand still around my wrist. He let go before I said anything. His voice softened, not kind, just quieter. "We have to go in. He's already noticed." I blinked. "Victor?" Ethan's mouth tightened. "He's watching. Just don't say anything. Let me talk. Let me fix this." "Fix what?" I asked. "Me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, adjusted my hair, fingers clinical, and then held out his arm. I hesitated, but I took it, because part of me still believed maybe he was just scared, that maybe, behind all the control, he was doing what he thought he had to. The ballroom opened before us, awash in light, glittering wine glasses, laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. A photographer passed by, camera flashing like lightning in a storm. Ethan's grip on my arm tightened the moment we stepped into the frame. "Smile," he muttered. I did. Or at least, I moved my mouth in a way that resembled it. We weaved through clusters of donors and foundation trustees. People nodded politely at Ethan, too politely. Their glances brushed over me like I was decorative, like I wasn't worth stopping for. "You look underdressed. one woman said as we passed. I caught Ethan's jaw twitch. My chest tightened. A server floated by with champagne. I reached for a glass, fingers brushing the stem, but Ethan pulled me gently by the elbow before I could grab it. "Focus," he said low. We reached the corner near the stage where the family typically gathered, and there, just beyond the polished oak podium, was a figure partially obscured in shadow. Tall, still, watching. A tingle crept down my spine. "Is that him?" I whispered. "Don't look," Ethan snapped. "Just don't look. He doesn't like being stared at." I nodded, but something in me twisted. Because that man, there was something familiar about the tilt of his shoulders, the way he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. As if the world around him was just a performance he didn't care to applaud. My fingers itched. I wanted to turn. I wanted to look him full in the face and ask, "Have we met?" But I didn't. Because Ethan was right. This wasn't the place. Still, the question wouldn't let go. Could he be watching because he recognized me? My stomach sank. What if it wasn't just my scarf I gave away in that park? What if I gave away the one thing that could have changed everything? Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the crowd. A flicker of movement. A man in a dark gray suit, weaving through the guests like a thread slipping through a seam. For a second, our eyes locked. Blue, sharp, the same as the man on the bench. My breath caught in my throat. Then he disappeared behind a marble column. I turned to Ethan. There was someone. "Stop," he said, his voice steel. "Whatever you think you saw, whatever story you're making in your head, just don't. Not tonight." His words landed like cold water. And for the first time since I met him, I didn't believe him. Not completely, because if the man from the park was here dressed like he belonged, then none of this was what it seemed. The ballroom glittered like a dream I never meant to walk into. Every corner was touched by gold, chandeliers dripping light like melted glass, marble floors polished so smooth they reflected the movement of silk gowns and crisp tuxedos like water. Even the air felt richer in here, laced with champagne and candle wax and something colder, like judgment hiding in perfume. Ethan's hand hovered at the small of my back, not touching but close, like a guide on a tightrope, pretending he wouldn't let me fall. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because somewhere behind me I was still trying to shake the image of that man's eyes. The man from the park, if it was him, it had to be. The shape of his mouth, the weight in his stare, different suit, different setting, same sharp look that sliced right through pretense. But I didn't say his name. I didn't dare. Instead, I kept moving. We passed by clusters of laughter, tight, controlled bursts, the kind meant for show. Men adjusted cuffs. Women clinked their flutes together with gloved fingers. I caught fragments of conversation as we walked. Stock talk, real estate wins, vacation homes in the south of France, all in a tone that somehow managed to be both bored and boastful. My dress, the one I'd spent all night folding and worrying over, felt like paper against my skin. Too plain, too soft, too honest. I gripped my clutch tighter. My fingers ached. "Let's mingle," Ethan whispered, his jaw barely moving. I followed him toward a semicircle of donors laughing around a server with champagne. He smiled wide and empty, introducing me as Lily, my fiancé. They nodded. Not one of them said hello. A woman with perfectly sculpted cheekbones leaned toward Ethan. "Your father's still behind the curtain, I hear," she asked, voice as delicate as spun glass. He nodded once. "He'll make his entrance when he's ready." They all smiled knowingly, like that was normal, like having a host who ghosted his own party wasn't unnerving. "Is it true he's funding that new artificial intelligence firm?" another man asked. Ethan tensed, then laughed it off. "Victor Caldwell funds what he finds useful, or dangerous." That drew chuckles. I didn't laugh. My eyes drifted toward the far end of the ballroom, to the velvet curtain that separated the guests from the VIP wing. Behind that curtain, someone was watching. I could feel it again. That weight. It sat between my shoulder blades, cool and steady. I knew I was being observed, but not the way the donors watched each other, measured and self-serving. This felt personal. "You okay?" Ethan asked from the corner of his mouth. I nodded, too quickly. He offered me a flute of champagne. My hand wrapped around the stem, but I didn't lift it. "Smile," he said through his teeth. I forced it, thin, brittle. My lips trembled around the edges. A violinist began a solo near the stage. The sound floated through the room like silk unraveling, and in that strange hush that followed, I felt something shift. A man stood in the far corner, half lit beneath a brass wall sconce. He wasn't holding a drink. He wasn't talking. He was just staring at me. I blinked. He didn't. The light caught his eyes just right, blue, piercing, impossibly familiar. My fingers went numb around the glass. It's him. I knew it in the marrow of me. The stranger from the park, the one I gave my sandwich to, my scarf. Now here in a suit that probably cost more than my rent. But how? Why? I turned toward Ethan. That man, don't, he said quickly. Don't start. I said don't. His voice dropped so low it almost disappeared. This isn't the time, Lily. You're nervous. You're seeing things. Just don't make a scene. My throat closed, because in that moment I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until now. Ethan didn't want me to be right. He didn't even look where I pointed. He wasn't afraid the man wasn't who I thought he was. He was afraid that he was. The violinist played louder now. The crowd shifted toward the stage as the MC tapped the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the Caldwell Foundation's annual gala. The curtain behind the stage stirred. A ripple went through the crowd. People straightened their backs, turned their heads, laughed a little too loud. Victor Caldwell was coming, but I didn't move because my eyes were still locked on the man in the corner, and he was smiling now, not a full smile, just the edge of one, enough to tell me he knew I'd recognized him. The lights dimmed slightly as the MC began listing off board members and benefactors. People clapped on cue, but my ears had gone underwater. I heard my own breath more than the applause, because I wasn't clapping. I was still staring at the corner where he'd stood, and just like that, he was gone, vanished, like he'd never been there at all. Except I knew he had. I wasn't imagining it. Ethan leaned in again, his lips barely touching my ear. Smile, and for the love of God, stop looking around like a lost dog. I pulled away from him slightly, and for the first time since walking into this world of silk and power and empty smiles, I realized something sharp and dangerous. I wasn't just being watched, I was being tested, and not by the crowd, by him. But the real question was, why? The applause faded, but my heart didn't stop pounding. I stood there, stuck in the dazzle of chandeliers and camera flashes, pretending to sip champagne I couldn't taste. All around me, the crowd leaned forward in anticipation of Victor Caldwell's grand entrance. But I couldn't stop glancing toward the shadows. The man, the stranger from the park, was gone. And yet his presence clung to the edges of the ballroom like static electricity. I could feel him. Or maybe it was just the doubt creeping in. Did I imagine it? Did I want it to be him so badly that I'd conjured it from nerves and too little sleep? Ethan was saying something to a board member, his smile sharp and overpolished. His hand rested on my lower back again, guiding me from group to group like a well-trained accessory. But I couldn't stop scanning the room. Then it happened. We were weaving through a cluster of attendees near the rear of the ballroom when I caught sight of him again. Standing near the mirrored column, his reflection blending into the gilded edges of the room. He wore a tailored suit now, midnight blue with subtle pinstripes, and a white pocket square folded with surgical precision. His hair had been neatly combed back. The cashmere scarf was gone, but the eyes? Still blue, still knowing, still him. My breath caught. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was studying the room with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to say much to own it. He turned to speak to someone, a waiter, I think, and the way he nodded, the way people stepped back ever so slightly. This man wasn't a guest. He was someone. But how? How does a man go from shivering on a bench to commanding a ballroom like a monarch in exile? I took a half step toward him. Lily, Ethan said sharply. His voice was quiet but edged with steel. What are you doing? I blinked. That man, he's... Don't, Ethan cut in. Don't do this here. He was in the park. I don't care, he snapped. People turned. His tone had cracked too loud for the room's carefully measured hum. Ethan composed himself quickly, lips pressing into a tight smile, then leaned in again. If you want to tank everything tonight because you feel like playing detective, go ahead, but don't drag me down with you. I swallowed the heat rising in my chest. You don't see it? I whispered. He's not just some guest. Ethan turned and scanned the crowd, feigning nonchalance. His eyes flicked past the man in the blue suit. Just another donor, he said. Don't make it more than that. But something about his face didn't match his words. A flicker, a hesitation, a glint of fear, maybe? No, not fear. Recognition. Ethan knew him. He was lying. A waiter approached with a tray of appetizers. I declined with a shake of my head, stomach twisted too tight to eat. Ethan grabbed a flute of champagne, took a long sip, then looked down at me. You need to pull it together. His words dropped like ice. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because suddenly, the noise around us blurred. The music, the laughter, the dull clinking of forks and crystal, all of it faded beneath the sound of my own pulse. And a memory, sharp and sudden, rose to the surface. My mother standing in the kitchen, her hands wrapped in dish towels, staring down at a letter on the table. Some people, she said, voice trembling, build their kingdoms on the backs of ghosts. I'd never understood what she meant, until now, because the man across the ballroom didn't just look familiar. He felt like something that had been circling my life long before I met Ethan. My fingers curled around my clutch, knuckles tight. I turned back toward the mirrored column, and he was gone again, like smoke, like a warning. The MC returned to the stage, announcing dinner would be served shortly. The crowd shifted again, breaking apart like waves returning to sea. Ethan guided us toward the head table. My feet moved, but my mind stayed frozen on the space he'd just occupied. We reached the table, and Ethan pulled out a chair for me. I sat stiffly, scanning every angle of the room while pretending to nod along to the pleasantries exchanged around me. Then, right before the salad course was served, a voice drifted behind me. Calm, smooth, almost amused. Ms. Harper. I turned. And there he was, closer than ever. Those blue eyes locked onto mine with disarming clarity. Forgive the interruption, he said, but I believe we've met. My throat tightened. He extended a hand, the gesture formal, refined. Ethan stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Lily, he said, voice barely controlled. This is Mr. Grayson. He's... But I wasn't listening. Because that name meant nothing. But the look in his eyes, that meant everything. I took his hand. It was warm, steady, and for just a breath I forgot where I was. I forgot the chandeliers and the dresses and Ethan's tight smile, because my mind was screaming something I couldn't ignore. This isn't over. And whoever Mr. Grayson was, he wasn't done with me yet. The moment Mr. Grayson let go of my hand, the air shifted. I sat down slowly, my palms damp against the cool linen of the tablecloth. He moved on like nothing had happened, exchanging polite nods with the next guest, his posture relaxed, almost disinterested. But I felt the weight of that brief contact settle into my chest, like a secret I hadn't agreed to keep. Ethan didn't speak. He just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, the muscle in his cheek pulsing. Dinner arrived in courses I barely touched, each plate more beautiful than the last, roasted duck over fig reduction, something with truffle foam, a salad that looked like art. I pushed my food around while the conversations floated past me, hollow and indulgent. My mind was still with that man, Mr. Grayson. He said we'd met, but he didn't mention where. And he hadn't smiled again, not even once. I excused myself before dessert, murmuring something about needing air, and slipped into one of the side hallways. The noise of the gala thinned behind me, replaced by quiet and the soft thud of my heels on plush carpet. The hallway felt older than the rest of the ballroom. Dark wood panels lined the walls, and the sconces flickered faintly like they'd been installed decades ago. Every step I took felt like a trespass. I wasn't sure where I was going, only that I needed a minute to breathe. Then I saw it. An open door at the end of the hall, spilling warm amber light onto the carpet. I paused in the doorway. It looked like a private study, cozy in a way the rest of the building wasn't. Leather chairs, a fireplace crackling quietly. Stacks of books lined the walls. A side table with a half-full glass of scotch. Whoever had been here had just left. I stepped inside before I could think better of it. The fire made the air feel thicker. My throat tightened. I let my fingers graze the edge of a worn armchair, And then, something caught my eye. A letter. It was sitting on the desk, half tucked under a folded newspaper. Cream-colored stationery, thick and expensive. The Caldwell crest embossed in gold at the top. The envelope wasn't sealed. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe because some part of me already knew. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in looping ink. Test them all. Watch who they become when they think you're no one. My breath snagged. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. Not rushed, not angry. It didn't feel like a note. It felt like an instruction. I read the line again. Test them all. Them? Who was them? Donors? Guests? Or people like me? My chest hollowed. Was I being tested? Not just tonight. The park, the scarf, the sandwich. Had it all been a setup? I folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. My mind ran through everything like dominoes falling. Mr. Grayson hadn't looked surprised to see me, not even curious, just expectant. Had he known who I was before I ever stepped foot in that ballroom? A noise behind me made me freeze. Footsteps. I turned just as Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression taut with alarm. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice hushed but sharp. "You can't be in here." "I just needed air," I said too quickly. "It was open." He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. His eyes dropped to the letter still in my hand. "What's that?" "Nothing," I lied, slipping it into my clutch. "Lily." His tone changed. Less panic, more control. "You shouldn't go snooping through other people's things, especially not my father's." I blinked. "This is Victor's room?" Ethan said nothing. My blood ran cold. "Why does your father keep a letter like that?" I asked. Ethan walked toward the fireplace, staring into the flames. "Because that's what he does," he said quietly. "He tests people. He always has. It's how he decides who's useful, who deserves trust." I stared at him, stunned. "So it's true. That man in the park?" "I don't know what you saw," Ethan said quickly. "But if you think this is about some kind of noble character test, don't." There was a pause. Something coiled and heavy stretched between us. "I didn't tell you," he added, "because I knew you'd get emotional. You'd take it personally." I almost laughed. "You don't see how personal this is?" He looked at me finally. His face wasn't angry. It was tired, worn down by a lifetime of trying to please someone who never clapped for anything. "I've been jumping through his hoops since I was 5, he said. "If you want to survive him, you do what he says. You let yourself be tested. You pass." "But that's not trust," I said. "That's control." He didn't respond. The silence said enough. I walked past him toward the door, hand gripping my clutch so tight I could feel the corner of the letter pressing into my skin. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I don't know," I said, glancing back. "But I think someone here knows more about who I am than you ever did." And I stepped into the hall, heart racing. Because the note wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And Mr. Grayson, whoever he really was, had just opened a door I wasn't sure I could close. I barely made it halfway down the hall before a voice stopped me. "Lily!" Low, intentional, a ripple beneath the surface of everything I thought I knew. I turned slowly. Mr. Grayson stood just a few feet away, his silhouette framed by the edge of the hallway's dim sconce light. No one else was around. The muffled noise of the gala was far behind us now, sealed off by polished oak doors. He didn't move, neither did I. My fingers tightened around the clutch, still hiding the letter. Its corners pressed into my palm like punctuation to a sentence I hadn't finished reading. "I think it's time we talked," he said. I didn't answer, but he must have seen it in my eyes, curiosity smothered by suspicion. He gestured toward a side door. "There's a garden, no cameras, no audience, just answers." I hesitated for one more heartbeat, then I followed. The door creaked softly as it opened, and cool night air wrapped around us instantly, sweet with jasmine and distant city smoke. The sky above was dark velvet, the stars barely visible under New York's light haze. A path of stone curved between hedges trimmed with unnerving precision. Everything out here felt deliberate, too perfect to be peaceful. We walked a few feet in silence. Then he spoke. "You did something most people wouldn't have." He wasn't looking at me. His eyes followed the path ahead. "In that park, the sandwich, the scarf. You didn't ask who I was. You just saw someone cold. I swallowed. Were you testing me? I asked. From the beginning? He stopped walking, turned to face me. Yes. The honesty hit like cold water. My breath caught, but I didn't step back. He continued, not just you, everyone. For years. Why? His gaze was steady. Because I wanted to see who people were when they thought no one of importance was watching, when they thought their kindness wouldn't be rewarded. My throat tightened. And what did you see? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out something folded, soft and familiar. My scarf. The one I'd wrapped around him days ago without knowing his name. He handed it to me. It smelled faintly of cedar and winter. I'm not the man people describe in board meetings or headlines, he said quietly. I'm worse in some ways, and better in ways they'd never understand. You're Victor Caldwell. It wasn't a question. He nodded. Every piece slid into place, like a lock clicking open. The withdrawn billionaire, the ghost of the gala, the man who built empires and destroyed them without blinking. And I'd fed him a turkey sandwich on a park bench. I needed to know, he said, not just who my son was marrying, but who you were. The truth throbbed behind my ribs. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was too stunned. You watched me struggle. You let me believe. Yes, he interrupted gently, because your choices, when no one's watching, say more than your polished version ever could. I looked down at the scarf in my hands, suddenly heavier. I failed your son's test, I whispered, but I passed yours. Victor gave a single nod. It wasn't about passing or failing, he said. It was about seeing what mattered. Something in me cracked. I remembered the way Ethan looked at me when I arrived at the gala. The way he'd hissed about the scarf, the tardiness, the image. It had never been about me, just the performance. But this man, this powerful hidden father, had seen what Ethan had missed. You terrify him, I said. Victor's eyes crinkled with something close to amusement. I terrify a lot of people. Do you know what it's like, I said, voice trembling now, to be measured by someone else's rules? To feel like you have to shrink who you are just to survive a dinner table? His jaw tightened. My wife did. I blinked. She used to say that silence can be a prison, he murmured. So I started listening more carefully when people said nothing. A quiet fell over us. Wind rustled the hedges. Somewhere in the distance, a champagne glass shattered. Then he said, You deserve better than what my son offered you tonight. I looked up. You saw that. All of it. The weight of it hit me, and then, just as the silence stretched too long, he pulled something from his breast pocket, a small key. I keep a record of everything, he said. Letters, contracts, mistakes. He handed me the key. There's a drawer in the library, bottom left. Read what's in it. Then decide if you still want to marry my son. My fingers closed around the key, cold and sharp. Victor's eyes softened. You don't owe him loyalty just because he gave you a ring. I'm not sure I ever really had him, I said. He nodded once, then turned and walked away, back through the side door, vanishing into the light of the mansion like he'd never left it. I stood in the dark, fingers wrapped around a scarf and a key. And for the first time that night, I felt something deeper than confusion or anger. I felt ready. But ready for what? That answer I knew was waiting behind a locked drawer. I held the key so tightly the ridges dug into my skin. Back inside, the air felt different, thicker, like the walls were holding their breath. Laughter and clinking glasses still echoed faintly from the ballroom, but out here, in the quiet corridor, something heavier moved between the shadows. I found the library tucked behind an arched mahogany door. It smelled of old leather and sharp cedar, and the lamps were dimmed low, as if the room only ever lit up when summoned by memory. Tall shelves loomed, full of lives catalogued in hardback. On the far end, a desk carved from deep walnut sat beneath an oil painting of a stern-faced man I assumed was one of Victor's ancestors. I crossed the rug slowly, the key cold in my palm. The bottom left drawer stuck slightly as I pulled, resisting like it knew it shouldn't open for just anyone. Then it gave. Inside was a folder, thick, heavy, a name scrawled across the top, Ethan Caldwell. I froze. My breath hitched, and for a long second I just stared. My heart thudded against my ribs. This wasn't just a drawer of company files or legal records. This was a dossier. On him. I pulled it out slowly, fingers trembling. The first few pages were standard, educational history, performance reports, internships. But as I flipped deeper, the tone shifted. Clippings, emails, surveillance photos, and then a transcript of a call between Ethan and someone named Daniel Rhodes. The name was vaguely familiar, one of Victor's former partners, if I remembered right. The conversation was clipped and tense, businesslike, but one line sent a jolt through me. "Don't worry, he'll never know it was me who leaked it. As long as the old man thinks it was internal, I'm clean." I stared at the sentence like it might rearrange itself. Ethan had sabotaged his own father? My legs weakened. I sank into the leather chair beside the desk, the folder open on my lap. Pages blurred together, contracts, inconsistencies, transfer records that suggested Ethan had quietly rerouted funds, small, strategic amounts, to an offshore account months before I even met him. Why? Why would someone so desperate for Victor's approval betray him? Unless it wasn't about approval at all. It was about inheritance, about winning, about control. And suddenly the anger made sense, the panic, the desperate need to control me, my image, our story, because I was never the test. He was. The door behind me clicked. I jolted, standing so fast the chair groaned. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face pale and tight. "You shouldn't be in here." I didn't say anything, just held the folder against my chest like a shield. "You read it?" he asked. I nodded. His jaw clenched. "Then you understand." "I don't," I said, voice thin. Why would you do that to him?" "Because he forced me to," Ethan snapped. "Because my whole life has been one endless game of proving I'm good enough." "You think this test was new? You think you're special because he played dress up and made you feel seen? He's been testing me since I was a kid." He stepped forward, hands trembling at his sides. I lost everything trying to win his approval, and when I realized he was never going to give it, "You decided to destroy him?" I cut in, his face twisted. "I decided to survive." There it was. Not shame, not remorse, just survival. "I would have protected you," he said, "if you'd just let me, if you'd stayed out of this." My voice shook. "You lied to me, over and over." "For us," he said, "so we could build something. He never would have let you in, Lily. You think that scarf changed everything? It didn't. He was always going to use you as leverage, just like he used me." I shook my head, stepping backward toward the door. "I don't know who I'm looking at anymore." He laughed, sharp, joyless. "Don't pretend you're clean. You went digging the moment you got scared. You found a locked drawer and couldn't resist, just like him, always testing, always needing to know everything." My chest rose and fell with shallow, unsteady breath. "Victor didn't lie to me," I said. "You did." A beat of silence. Then softly, almost gently, Ethan said, "And what are you going to do now?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Outside the library, the hallway was still. But as I stepped out, the weight of something shifted again. A figure at the far end, someone watching. Not Victor, not staff, someone unfamiliar. Wearing a hood, half-shadowed, gone the second I blinked. A chill ran up my spine. I turned back into the light, heart still pounding, Ethan's words echoing in my head. "I would have protected you if you'd stayed out of this." But I was in it now, and someone else was watching. The hallway felt colder than before. My steps slowed as I reached the end, where the last flicker of warm light bled into shadow. The air carried the scent of wax and velvet, soft, expensive, clinging. But there was something else beneath it now, something sour and metallic that I couldn't name. The figure was gone, or hiding. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of light maybe, a waiter taking a smoke break. But I couldn't shake the way my skin prickled. Someone had been watching me. Not like Victor had watched me, with calculation. This felt closer to a threat. I stepped outside into the garden, the cold slapping harder than I expected. The wind sliced down the back of my dress. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling exposed, unseen, but not alone. My eyes scanned the garden paths, trimmed hedges curling like serpents into the dark. A flicker of movement to my left, Just a rustle, but enough to make me tense. "Hello?" I called out. Stupid. But the silence was louder than my voice. Then I saw it. A slip of paper. Torn, curled against the base of a statue. I moved toward it, heels sinking into the grass. My fingers were shaking as I picked it up. Blocky handwriting in black ink. "You're not safe." My pulse jumped to my throat. The paper was thin and cold, like it had been waiting for me. I turned, scanning the dark. Nothing. My brain rushed in 10 directions at once. Was this Ethan? Some cruel ploy? A final shove to convince me he was the only protection I had left? No, the ink was too shaky. The lettering? Unfamiliar. And Ethan didn't warn. He controlled. I folded the note and slipped it into the side of my clutch, hands still trembling. I needed answers. But right now, I needed to get out of the dark. Back inside, the hallway was empty again. I pushed open the ballroom door just enough to slip through. The atmosphere had shifted. Music was softer. The lights dimmer, like the room had exhaled after something sharp. Then I saw Victor, standing near the far wall, alone, not talking, not smiling, just thinking. I crossed the room without stopping to calculate. No performance now, just urgency. "Someone followed me into the garden," I said, voice low but direct. "They left this." I passed him the note. His eyes scanned it. Something flickered across his face. Recognition? Anger? He said nothing. I pressed. "Was it you? Another test?" He folded the paper calmly, tucked it into his pocket. "No." His voice was quieter than I expected. "No, Lily, this wasn't me." The words chilled me more than the air outside. "Then who?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "Someone who doesn't want you here." A beat passed. "Do you?" I asked. That softened something in his face, just slightly. "I want to see who you become when fear is real," he said. "Not simulated." I stared at him, unsure whether to be flattered or horrified. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared. His tie was loosened, his smile forced. I recognized the mask now, the way he used charm to contain panic. "We need to talk," he said. Victor looked at him the way a hawk looks at something small. "About what?" Victor asked. "About this whole circus," Ethan replied. "About boundaries. You don't get to run my relationship like it's a boardroom." My heart tightened. Victor stepped forward slowly. "This is not about your relationship. It's about legacy, something you've already fumbled once." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You want to talk about betrayal?" Victor tilted his head. "Do you?" Ethan turned to me. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked. "Being the centerpiece in his latest morality game?" "I'm not a game piece," I said. "But maybe you are." He looked stunned. Just for a second. Then he smiled, bitter, crooked. "You really think he's doing this to protect you?" he asked. "You think this is about kindness? No. He wants a story. He wants a redemption arc with your name on it." Victor's voice cut in, low, final. "Leave. Now." Ethan didn't move. "I said," Victor repeated, "leave." Ethan turned, and his eyes met mine one last time. "You don't know what he's capable of." Then he walked off into the crowd. Victor exhaled through his nose. "You should go home," he told me. "Tonight's over." But I didn't move. Instead, I asked, "Who else knows about that drawer?" His eyes locked on mine. A pause. Then, "No one who dare speak of it." That wasn't comforting. "Then why am I getting notes from ghosts?" I asked. "Who's following me?" Victor hesitated. "There are things," he said, "I thought I buried years ago. Maybe they've come back." I wanted to ask more, press for clarity, but someone across the ballroom caught my eye, the man from the garden. Not Ethan, not Victor. A stranger, watching, again. He turned and disappeared behind the curtain. Victor followed my gaze. "What did he look like?" he asked. I opened my mouth, but my voice caught. Because the face had been familiar, but not his familiar, someone else's. Someone I hadn't thought about in years. And suddenly, I wasn't sure whose secrets I was standing in anymore. I didn't sleep that night, not even close. I kept replaying the man's face in my head, the one from the garden, the one who vanished behind the curtain, and I swore I knew him. But memory played tricks when fear was in the room. The note, the locked drawer, the surveillance photos in Victor's file on Ethan. They all spiraled inside me like a quiet storm. But it wasn't until morning, when Ethan finally came home, that everything detonated. He closed the apartment door behind him with the weight of someone who'd run out of performances. His jacket was still on. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Where were you?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, but my hands resting on my knees trembled slightly. He dropped his keys into the bowl near the entry and didn't answer. "I asked you something." He looked up finally. "Out." "That's not an answer. I needed space, Lily," he snapped. "I just watched my father humiliate me in front of half the state's elite. Forgive me if I wasn't in the mood for a debrief." I rose slowly. "You humiliated yourself." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "You think he did that for you?" I continued. "That whole dinner was a show. He used me to prove something, and the worst part, you knew he would." Ethan's expression cracked. "You think I had control?" he said. "You don't know what he's like. You think you saw the real Victor Caldwell? No, that was a shadow, a performance for you." I stepped forward. "I saw a man who may be cold, maybe manipulative, but he wasn't the one who lied to me for 2 years. His face twisted. "You read the folder." I didn't deny it. "So what?" he said, shrugging. "I made a call. I covered a leak. It was business." "It was betrayal," I said. He laughed, bitter and hollow. "Of who? The man who's been testing me since I was 5? Who treats everyone like pawns?" "You could have walked away. You could have built something different." "I was building something different," he growled. "With you. Until you decided to become his new favorite project." His words hit like a slap, but they didn't knock me down, because for the first time I saw him clearly. Not the curated version, the one who brought me flowers and whispered dreams into my ear. The version that had always been afraid of losing status, afraid of being less, afraid of me knowing the truth. "You were never building anything," I said. "You were just trying to win, and now you've lost." He stepped toward me, something sharp in his eyes. "You think he cares about you? You think that scarf made you special?" I held his gaze. "No, but it told me who I am, and that's more than you ever gave me." He stared at me a beat too long, then, almost too quietly, said, "You think this ends with a drawer and a note? You're in deeper than you know, Lily." "What does that mean?" He grabbed his coat again, already heading for the door. "Ask your mother." I froze. "What?" He looked back at me just once as the door opened. "You really don't know, do you?" Then he was gone. And my world tilted. Because the look in his eyes when he said it, that wasn't manipulation. That was truth. I sat back down, trying to piece it together, heart pounding. My mother had passed 3 years ago. What could Ethan possibly mean? Unless he didn't mean now, he meant then. I got up, pulled out the dusty file box from the closet. Letters, medical bills, her handwritten recipes, everything she'd ever left behind was in here. And buried at the bottom, beneath a stack of greeting cards, was a single envelope I'd never opened, addressed to me. I stared at it, fingers numb. No stamp, no return address, just my name. I opened it slowly. Inside, a single page. "If anything happens to me, don't trust Victor Caldwell." The words hit like a punch to the ribs. Below that, scribbled in rushed handwriting, "He covered something up, a long time ago. Ask about Grayson." My breath stopped. Grayson, the man from the park. Victor Caldwell's alias. I dropped the letter, the floor tilting beneath my feet. My mother knew him. She knew him and never told me. She knew what he was capable of. The room spun as the pieces crashed together, and then behind me a knock at the door. Not loud, just one short tap. Then silence. I turned toward it, every nerve on edge. I wasn't sure who I was afraid to find on the other side. Ethan, Victor, or someone else entirely? The knock lingered like an echo. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my mother's letter still open on the couch, Victor Caldwell's name scrawled in her handwriting like a scar. One tap. No follow-up. No knock again. Just silence. I stepped closer to the door, barefoot, heart pounding so loud it almost drowned out the city noise beyond my window. Through the peephole, nothing. No figure, no shadow. But taped to the doorframe, almost hidden in the crevice where metal met wood, was something small and square. A photograph. I peeled it off with shaky fingers. It was grainy, printed on old matte paper, but the image was unmistakable. A younger version of my mother, smiling, and standing beside her, Victor, not disguised, not hidden, full suit, clear daylight, his hand resting gently on her shoulder like they'd known each other well. Too well. Beneath the photo, written in ink, "Not everything was a test." I didn't sleep. Again. I stayed at the kitchen table until dawn broke, my scarf draped over my shoulders like armor, rereading my mother's note and staring at that photo until it blurred. When the first light hit the windows, I called him. Victor answered after one ring. "I need to see you," I said. His voice didn't hesitate. "Come now." The Caldwell estate was eerily quiet when I arrived. No gala music, no guests, just dew-soft grass and the hush of morning over marble. Victor was in the garden, the same one where he'd first revealed himself to me. He wore no coat this time, just a navy sweater, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked smaller somehow in the light, but not weaker. He watched me approach, no smile. "I assume you found the letter," he said. I nodded. "And the photo." He motioned toward the bench beside him. "Sit." I hesitated, then joined him. The cushion was still warm. "She trusted you," I said. "Didn't she?" He didn't look at me. For a time. There was a long pause. Then he added, "We met years before she had you. It was brief, but it mattered. She warned me not to trust you." He nodded. She was right. That stunned me. He turned to face me then, the deep lines around his mouth carved by more than age. "I made choices back then. Selfish ones. She saw what I was becoming and walked away. I didn't chase her." "Why not?" "Because if I had, I might have destroyed her." The wind stirred the hedges around us, whispering secrets into the leaves. "You tested me," I said. "You tested everyone. I had to." "No, you wanted to." His eyes met mine. "That's fair." I took a deep breath. "Then tell me something real," I said. "For once." He leaned back slowly. "I've built empires by knowing when people lie, but I never figured out how to believe them when they told the truth. Your mother did. She believed too easily, and paid for it." My chest tightened. "She was scared," I whispered. Victor's voice dropped. "And she had reason to be." I turned toward him. "Then tell me, was she running from you, or something else?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket, opened it. Inside was the scarf, folded, clean, intact. "I kept it," he said, "not as a trophy, as a reminder of the moment you became more than a name to me." I stared down at the fabric, the scarf I'd given without thinking, the one that started everything. "It wasn't about the scarf," he continued. "It was about what it meant to you. You gave it away, and didn't think twice." I blinked back the tightness behind my eyes. "That's what she did too," he added. For a long time we said nothing. Then I asked the question that had haunted me since the letter. "Why didn't she tell me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because she wanted to protect you from the man I used to be." "And now?" Victor's voice was quiet. "Now I want to protect you from the man my son has become." The words hit like a gust of wind. I knew Ethan was broken, but I hadn't realized how far the damage reached. "I need to know everything," I said. "No more riddles, no more whispers." "You will," Victor said, "but first you need to rest." "I can't," he stood. "I'll take care of the threat," he said. "Whoever's watching you, whoever left that photo, that note, they're not above making you the next target. I won't allow that." He turned, then paused. "You may not forgive me," he added, "but you'll understand me soon." He left the scarf on the bench beside me and walked away. As I held it in my lap, fingers curled tight around the edge, a movement caught my eye near the tree line. A figure. Watching again. This time, they didn't run. They took one slow step forward. And in the rising sun, I saw the glint of something metallic in their hand. Not a camera, not a phone, something worse. And suddenly, redemption felt very far away. The figure stepped out of the trees like it belonged there. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in broken lines, glinting off the metal in his hand. Not a weapon, at least not the kind I feared. Just a lighter, silver, worn at the edges, flicked once, then tucked away. He looked at me like we'd met before. We hadn't, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Same angular jawline as Victor, Same silence that spoke louder than words. I stood from the garden bench, the scarf still draped over my arms. My heart beat slow but heavy, like it knew this wasn't danger. It was a memory walking back into the light. "You're his brother," I said. He nodded once. "Was, before he erased me. Victor's long-lost older brother, the one no one mentioned, the one even Ethan didn't know existed." "You're Grayson," I whispered. "Only in whispers," he replied, "but that's about to change." He moved closer, slow, deliberate. His presence wasn't threatening, but it wasn't comforting either, just honest, like he had nothing left to lose. "You left the photo," I said. "The note. I needed you to know where you stood," he said, "because I've seen how this family swallows people whole." "And you want what? Revenge?" He tilted his head. "Closure." He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was worn, like it had been carried through a lifetime of almosts. "For him," he said. "He deserves the truth." He placed it on the bench next to me and turned to leave, but I stopped him. "Why now?" He didn't look back. "Because you reminded me of her. Her, my mother." And then he was gone, swallowed by trees and morning light. I found Victor in the study. The room was quiet, shadows softened by the late morning sun. He turned when I entered. "I know who he is," I said. He didn't deny it. "He said you erased him." Victor sat down, the weight of years settling across his shoulders like a second coat. "I did what I thought was necessary," he said. "He made choices that endangered this family. I couldn't let him stay." "And Mom?" He looked up sharply. "She knew," I said. "She left because she knew what you'd done." Victor didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "She asked me once if I could love something I couldn't control. I never answered." I placed the envelope on the desk. "He came back to give you this." Victor stared at it, but didn't reach for it. "I've lived with ghosts," he said, "but I never expected one to knock on my door again." "You should read it." He looked at me, really looked. "You've changed," he said. "No," I replied. "I just stopped pretending." A long silence stretched between us. Then Victor stood. "I won't stop being who I am," he said, "but I won't stop you either." "I'm not here to win anything," I said. "I just wanted to understand." "And now?" I held his gaze. "Now I just want to live." The garden looked different that afternoon. Softer, less staged, more real. Victor stayed inside. Ethan was gone, really gone this time, and I stood there alone, breathing. 3 months later, we married in my parents' backyard. Not a gala, no orchestras, just mismatched chairs, string lights, and the scent of wildflowers my neighbors helped plant. Victor came, not in a limo, but in an old car that had more rust than chrome. He wore a dark suit and the scarf I'd given him, looped once, not perfectly arranged. He didn't speak much, just watched. And when I looked over during the vows, he smiled. Not approval, just peace, and that was enough. I used to think being chosen was the goal. Now I know, choosing yourself is the victory. Kindness isn't something you perform, it's something you risk. And trust isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in small moments, like handing over your only lunch to a man you thought you'd never see again. This story began with a sandwich. It ended with a choice. And in between, I found myself. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this story touched you, please hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Drop a comment. Tell me what moment hit you hardest. And if you're craving more stories like this one, don't miss our next upload. I'll be waiting.